Welcome to InfoStream, your daily current. Unsure what to listen to? Turn to us for today's headlines. Stay informed. Sudan conflict worsens, creating a humanitarian crisis. Tanzania faces unrest following disputed election results. China-Netherlands chip dispute and Canada-China relations are changing. Nuclear tensions increase with strategic maneuvering. Campari tax evasion leads to share seizures. India's passport ranking declines due to global mobility shifts. Turkish football officials suspended after a vetting probe. Pentagon scrutiny of drug strike strategy raises legal concerns. Ukraine defends Pokrovsk against Russian advances. Grand Egyptian Museum opens, signifying a new era for Egyptology. Federal judges order Trump administration to use the SNAP funds. Government shutdown standoff continues with calls for a filibuster elimination. Upcoming gubernatorial races show mixed early voting data. Epstein's financial network revealed with JPMorgan's delayed response. Judge blocks Trump's voter-proof mandate. Sudan conflict escalating crisis and humanitarian catastrophe. The ongoing conflict in Sudan, primarily between the Sudanese army and the Rapid Support Forces, RSF, continues to escalate, creating a severe humanitarian crisis. Over 60,000 people have fled the captured city of El Fasher, a strategic location, with harrowing accounts of atrocities, including rape and mass executions, emerging. 12-year-old Abdi Wahab's escape story highlights the brutal reality, detailing assaults and accusations of espionage while navigating perilous conditions. The UN estimates over 260,000 people remain trapped in El Fasher, facing famine-like conditions and a collapse of essential services. The situation in El Fasher is characterized by widespread violence and arbitrary arrests, disproportionately affecting men and boys. The RSF, led by Gen Mohamed Hamdan Dagalo, has admitted to violations and is investigating the actions of Abu Lulu, a militia member accused of multiple executions, whose arrest was captured on video. Social media platforms, including TikTok, have taken action to ban accounts linked to Lulu. The influx of displaced individuals towards Tala, approximately 80 kilometers away, is overwhelming humanitarian resources. The UNHCR struggles to provide adequate shelter and food, with many arriving with injuries and malnutrition. The ongoing conflict has deepened the geographic split within Sudan, with the RSF controlling western Sudan and Kordofan, while the army maintains control of Khartoum and surrounding regions. The conflict's impact extends beyond El Fasher, contributing to a broader humanitarian crisis with over 150,000 deaths and 12 million displaced individuals across the country. The UN describes the situation as the world's largest humanitarian crisis. Further complicating matters, aid workers face increased danger, with 5 Red Crescent volunteers killed in another state, delaying relief efforts. The conflict's roots lie in a power struggle following a 2021 coup, and its devastating consequences continue to unfold, demanding urgent international action and a resolution to the ongoing hostilities. The BBC Verify team has debunked a manipulated video purporting to show President Putin discussing tensions between Pakistan and Afghanistan. Tanzania election, widespread unrest and disputed results. Following Wednesday's presidential election in Tanzania, the country is grappling with widespread unrest and disputed results, marked by significant violence and a prolonged internet shutdown. Samia Suluhu Hassan, who assumed the presidency in 2021 after John Magufuli's death, secured a decisive victory with approximately 31.9 million votes, representing 97.66% of the total, amidst accusations of fraud and irregularities. The Electoral Commission declared her the winner, but the opposition vehemently rejected the outcome, citing suppression of key opposition figures and flawed processes. Reports from the ground indicate a staggering death toll, with estimates ranging from 500 to 700 people killed by security forces during clashes with protesters. The exact number remains difficult to ascertain due to the government-imposed internet blackout, hindering verification efforts by journalists and human rights organizations. Hospitals are overwhelmed with casualties, and information is scarce. Protests, largely led by young people, have been ongoing in major cities like Dar es Salaam, fueled by accusations of electoral malpractice and the government's targeting of opposition leaders. Key figures, including Tundu Lissu, held on treason charges, and Luhaga Mpina, disqualified on technical grounds, were prevented from contesting the election. 16 smaller parties were permitted to participate. International observers and foreign embassies have expressed deep concern, with the UN, UK, Canada, and Norway reporting significant injuries and fatalities. Ambassadors have engaged with the Tanzanian government, urging restraint from security forces. Tourists are stranded due to the disruption of services, including flight cancellations and communication outages. The CCM party, which has dominated Tanzanian politics since independence, secured a resounding victory in Zanzibar, where incumbent President Hussein Mwinyi won with nearly 80% of the vote. The opposition in Zanzibar also reported massive fraud. The election has exposed a concerning deterioration of the political landscape in Tanzania, characterized by repression, suppression of dissent, and a lack of transparency. The ongoing unrest highlights deep-seated grievances and raises serious questions about the legitimacy of the election results. The situation remains volatile as the government attempts to quell the unrest and consolidate its power. China-Netherlands chip dispute resolution and Canada-China relations evolve. Recent developments indicate a significant shift in trade relations between China, the Netherlands, and Canada. Following a Cold War-era intervention by the Netherlands to seize control of the Chinese-owned chipmaker, Nexperia, China has announced a relaxation of its export ban, specifically addressing concerns about chips being processed in China. This decision, driven by the potential for disruptions to European automotive supply chains, has been met with criticism from The Hague, which attributes the current situation to improper interference. China's revised approach involves granting exemptions to eligible enterprises, though specific details remain unclear. The move is partly influenced by a meeting between U.S. President Donald Trump and Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping, where chips were discussed, potentially paving the way for the resumption of Nexperia exports, as anticipated by Reuters. Simultaneously, Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney has initiated a turning point in relations with China, following a 40-minute meeting with President Xi Jinping on the sidelines of the APEC summit. Both leaders directed their officials to swiftly resolve outstanding trade issues and irritants stemming from a protracted trade dispute. Carney's visit, the first between a Canadian Prime Minister and the Chinese President since 2017, underscores Canada's strategic shift towards strengthening trade ties with major Asian economies, particularly in response to U.S. tariffs. Both leaders acknowledged the need for a stable and sustainable relationship, with Carney emphasizing that direct communication is preferable to distance. The joint effort to address trade concerns represents a tangible step towards normalizing relations after a period of significant strain. The combined actions highlight a broader effort to mitigate global trade tensions and secure economic stability. Nuclear tensions rise amidst strategic maneuvering and cinematic concerns. A heightened sense of global nuclear risk is emerging due to a confluence of events, including Russian testing, U.S. responses, and the influence of a Netflix thriller. President Putin's announcement of new nuclear missile tests, followed by a call from Donald Trump for resuming U.S. testing, has reignited fears of a nuclear standoff. The U.S. response, coupled with North Korea's continued nuclear development, contributes to a volatile international landscape. The Netflix film A House of Dynamite, which explores the concept of mutually assured destruction, has prompted the Pentagon to issue a memo criticizing the film's depiction of flawed missile defense systems, framing it as a coin-toss scenario. The film's writer welcomes the criticism, emphasizing the need to address the global threat posed by nuclear weapons. The expiration of the U.S.-Russia New START treaty in February adds another layer of complexity. Prospects for renegotiation appear bleak, largely due to the ongoing tensions surrounding the war in Ukraine. Furthermore, the potential for a U.S.-China nuclear confrontation over Taiwan, alongside North Korea's expanding nuclear capabilities and the persistent risks posed by India and Pakistan, amplify the overall danger. The Pentagon's critique of A House of Dynamite highlights the strategic importance of perceived missile defense capabilities, suggesting they can deter aggression. However, developing such systems risks triggering an arms race. The Cold War experience, particularly the 1972 Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty, demonstrated the dangers of this dynamic. Regarding the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty, CTBT, it remains unratified by several key nuclear powers, including the US, China, Russia, North Korea, India, Pakistan, and Israel. While Bill Clinton helped negotiate the treaty in the 1990s, its ratification failed. The film's writer welcomes the criticism, since the movie's intention was to invite a conversation about an issue which we think is tremendously important and doesn't get enough attention, which is the fact that we have all these nuclear weapons that exist in the world and that pose a great threat to all mankind. The prospect of a trilateral deal involving the US, Russia, and China is increasingly linked to China's evolving nuclear capabilities. The current situation underscores the urgent need for dialogue and arms control measures to mitigate the escalating risks. Campari tax evasion investigation leads to share seizure. Italian police have seized drew 1.3 billion worth of shares from Campari Group, the owner of brands including Campari, Aperol, Grand Marnier, and Courvoisier, as part of a year-long investigation into alleged tax evasion. The seizure stems from a probe launched by Milan prosecutors concerning the company's absorption of its Italian arm. The core allegation involves undeclared capital gains of approximately $5.3 billion between 2018 and 2020, specifically regarding the failure to pay an exit tax levied on companies relocating their headquarters abroad. LagFin, which holds over 50% of Campari's shares and 80% of voting rights, is the entity from which the shares were taken. LagFin maintains it has consistently adhered to all applicable laws and regulations, including Italian tax laws, and views the situation as a tax dispute. The investigation centers on accusations that Campari transferred its Italian assets into foreign ownership solely for tax avoidance purposes. Several key figures are implicated, notably Luca Garavaglia, the billionaire heir to Campari ownership, and Giovanni Berto, the head of Campari's Italian branch. Despite the significant share seizure, LagFin insists it will vigorously defend itself and emphasizes its position as the controlling shareholder of Campari. The company's roots trace back to 1860, with Gaspare Campari's homemade bitter liqueur, which evolved into a commercial enterprise in 1904, followed by a period of acquisitions starting in the 1990s. Campari is currently valued at approximately $37 billion on the Milan Stock Exchange. The investigation is ongoing, and the outcome could have significant implications for the company's future operations and valuation. The seizure highlights concerns surrounding international corporate tax practices and the scrutiny applied to companies engaging in cross-border transactions. Indian passport ranking decline, a complex global mobility shift. The recent Henley Passport Index places India's passport in the 85th position out of 199 countries, a decrease from its ranking last year. This decline highlights a broader trend in global mobility and the increasing competitiveness among nations regarding visa-free travel agreements. The index, based on visa-free travel opportunities, reflects a nation's soft power and impacts citizen mobility, business opportunities, and learning prospects. India's passport strength has historically hovered in the 80s, with a notable dip to 90th in 2021. Despite the ranking drop, the number of countries offering visa-free access to Indian passport holders has actually increased over the past decade. In 2014, 52 nations offered this access, rising to 60 in 2023 and 62 in 2024. Currently in 2025, India has access to 57 countries, matching Mauritania's rank. However, the ranking remains stubbornly at 85, primarily due to heightened global competition for travel partnerships. The Henley Passport Index reveals a dramatic shift. The global average number of destinations accessible visa-free has nearly doubled from 58 in 2006 to 109 in 2025. China's experience illustrates this trend, increasing its visa-free destinations from 50 to 82 over the past decade, improving its index ranking from 94th to 60th. India's ranking decline reflects a loss of access to two countries after previously holding a rank of 77th in July and 59 in July 2024. The increasing global demand for travel options and nations actively pursuing more travel partnerships are contributing factors. The Henley Passport Index underscores the dynamic nature of global mobility and the challenges faced by countries seeking to maintain a strong passport, ranking in a rapidly evolving landscape. The competition for destinations and access to visa-free travel is intensifying, demanding strategic approaches for nations to bolster their passport strength. Turkish football officials face suspensions following betting probe. A significant shakeup is occurring within Turkish football, following a 5-year investigation that has uncovered widespread betting activity involving match officials. The Turkish Football Federation, TFF, has suspended 149 referees and assistant referees as a direct result of this probe. The penalties imposed range from 8 to 12 months, determined by the severity of their involvement in betting operations. The investigation initially revealed that 371 out of 571 professional match officials possessed betting accounts, with a concerning 152 actively engaging in gambling. The scale of the problem is staggering, with some officials placing a single bet, while others, including one individual, placed an extraordinary 18th-227 bets across numerous football matches. These activities represent a blatant violation of TFF disciplinary regulations, as well as those established by FIFA and UEFA, which strictly prohibit match officials from participating in betting. TFF President Ibrahim Hasiosmanoglu has described the situation as a moral crisis within Turkish football, highlighting a fundamental ethical issue at the heart of the sport. He emphasized the ongoing struggles faced by referees, stating that if even one official hadn't received adequate compensation, he would resign from his position. The TFF has taken steps to address this by improving referee salaries in recent years. The investigation is ongoing, with 3 additional officials currently under scrutiny. Details regarding the specific cases and the ongoing investigations have not been disclosed. The suspension of these officials represents a critical attempt to restore integrity and accountability within Turkish football, aiming to address systemic issues and prevent future misconduct. The repercussions are expected to have a significant impact on the sports landscape and its reputation. Pentagon's shifting drug strike strategy faces scrutiny and legal questions. The Pentagon has dramatically shifted its counter-narcotics strategy, focusing military strikes on suspected drug trafficking vessels in the Eastern Pacific Ocean rather than the Caribbean, driven by stronger intelligence linking cocaine transport routes to the U.S. This shift comes amid growing questions regarding the justification and effectiveness of the military's operations, particularly concerning the legal basis for the strikes and the lack of concrete data on their impact. Intelligence suggests a stronger connection between cocaine trafficking and U.S. markets originating from Colombia and Mexico, challenging previous assumptions centered on Venezuela. However, the administration's aggressive targeting of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro to link him to the drug trade has not yielded definitive evidence. The military's 4 recent strikes in the Pacific have been met with skepticism, with Secretary of State Marco Rubio stating one vessel was likely headed toward Trinidad and Tobago. Despite the shift, the Pentagon lacks clear metrics to assess the strike's success, admitting they have no data on whether the operations are impeding drug flow or influencing drug prices. Military officials also conceded they do not know the identities of individuals on struck vessels prior to attacks, citing a reluctance to detain or prosecute survivors due to evidentiary challenges. The strikes, initially focused on cocaine, have recently been reframed to target fentanyl, a drug that has surpassed cocaine in terms of overdose deaths. The administration's legal justification for the strikes remains opaque, with defense lawyers conspicuously absent from congressional briefings. Republican Sen. Roger Wicker and Democratic Sen. Jack Reed have publicly demanded clarification, and the Justice Department Office of Legal Counsel's opinion, but these requests have gone unanswered. This lack of legal oversight has fueled accusations of a partisan stunt by Senate Intelligence Committee Vice Chairman Mark Warner, highlighting concerns about congressional war powers. The administration's strategy has been met with criticism from both Republican and Democratic lawmakers, who are demanding greater transparency and accountability in the ongoing military operations. The administration's focus on fentanyl, coupled with the legal and strategic uncertainties, has raised significant questions about the future direction of the U.S. military's counter-narcotics efforts. Ukraine intensifies defense of Pokrovsk amidst Russian advances. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has designated the defense of Pokrovsk as a top priority, coinciding with the deployment of elite special forces from military intelligence and assault groups to bolster the town's defenses on the eastern front line. Reports indicate increasing Russian advances surrounding Pokrovsk, a strategically vital town west of Donetsk, and Ukraine vehemently denies claims of being encircled. The core objective remains the protection of supply lines crucial for supporting Ukrainian troops holding the town. Key to the situation is the strategic importance of Pokrovsk as a transport and supply hub. Capturing it could significantly facilitate Russia's broader efforts to seize control of the entire Donbas region. Furthermore, Kyiv believes Russia's attempt to control Pokrovsk is a deliberate tactic to influence the United States, demonstrating perceived military success and prompting Western acquiescence to Moscow's demands for territory. The deployment of military intelligence personnel, including Kirilo Budanov, underscores Ukraine's resolve to resist. Russia has asserted that its forces successfully eliminated Ukrainian special forces who arrived via helicopter. The ongoing conflict has escalated significantly, with Russia currently controlling approximately 1/5 of Ukrainian territory, including Crimea, annexed in 2014. U.S. frustration with Russia's stalled peace negotiations has led to sanctions against major oil producers and the postponement of a summit between President Trump and President Putin. Zelensky remains open to a ceasefire proposal that would freeze the conflict along existing front lines. His nightly address emphasized the continued destruction of Russian forces and the imperative to halt their progress. The battle for Pokrovsk represents a critical juncture in the war, with both sides recognizing its potential impact on the overall trajectory of the conflict. Grand Egyptian Museum opens, marking a new era for Egyptology. Egypt's Grand Egyptian Museum, (GEM), has officially opened, representing a monumental achievement in archaeological preservation and tourism. The museum, spanning 500,000 square meters, roughly 70 football pitches, is located near the Giza pyramids and boasts an unparalleled collection of over 100,000 artifacts spanning 7 millennia of Egyptian history. Construction, initiated in 2005, was delayed by financial crisis, the 2011 Arab Spring, and the COVID-19 pandemic, ultimately taking nearly as long to complete as the Great Pyramid. The museum's centerpiece is the complete Tutankhamun tomb, displaying the Boy King's mask throne and chariots for the first time since 1922, offering a comprehensive experience mirroring Howard Carter's original discovery. Other significant exhibits include a fourth 500-year-old funerary boat of Khufu, a third 200-year-old suspended obelisk of Ramesses II, and a 16-meter-long statue of the same pharaoh. The museum's exterior is adorned with hieroglyphs and alabaster triangles, while a giant staircase showcases statues of ancient kings and queens. The opening has reignited long-standing calls for the repatriation of key artifacts held in foreign museums. Dr. Zahi Hawass, a veteran archaeologist, advocates for the return of the Rosetta Stone from the British Museum, the Zodiac from the Louvre, and the bust of Nefertiti from Berlin, arguing that Egypt has historically gifted many treasures to the world. He believes these returns would represent a goodwill gesture. The GM is expected to attract up to 8 million visitors annually, significantly boosting Egyptian tourism. The museum's design, incorporating elements of ancient Egyptian aesthetics, aims to provide a unique and immersive experience for visitors. The project's completion signifies a renewed confidence in Egypt's ability to lead in archaeological endeavors and attract international attention to its rich cultural heritage. The museum's opening marks a new golden age for Egyptology and tourism, addressing previous delays and setting the stage for a significant contribution to global understanding of ancient Egyptian civilization. Federal judges order Trump administration to utilize emergency funds for SNAP benefits. Amidst the ongoing U.S. government shutdown, federal judges have ruled that the Trump administration must utilize emergency funds, specifically the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, a SNAP contingency fund, to provide at least partial food stamp benefits to millions of Americans in November. Two separate court orders, one issued in Massachusetts and the other in Rhode Island, mandated this action, rejecting the USDA's claim that it was legally barred from accessing these funds during the shutdown. The core of the dispute revolves around the USDA's attempt to avoid using the $5.3 billion contingency fund, arguing it would jeopardize other child nutrition programs supported by the revenue. However, the judges determined that the administration's stance was unlawful, asserting that the contingency fund was appropriated specifically for use in situations like government shutdowns. President Donald Trump responded by instructing his legal team to seek clarification on the administration's ability to fund SNAP benefits, acknowledging the potential delays. He emphasized a commitment to providing funding if legally permissible, drawing parallels to previous military and law enforcement pay disbursements. Despite Trump's directive, significant delays are anticipated. States had already halted the distribution of November SNAP benefits following a directive from the USDA on October 10th, a standard procedure involving data transmission to vendors for benefit card loading. The judges acknowledged this logistical hurdle and questioned the process for issuing partial payments if the contingency fund alone proved insufficient, estimated at $8.2 billion for the month. The USDA's reluctance to supplement the contingency fund with nearly $17 billion in tariff revenue designated for child nutrition programs further complicated the situation. Officials expressed concerns that diverting this revenue would harm those programs. However, the judges authorized the USDA to utilize both funds, albeit with the potential for reduced benefits if the contingency fund alone was exhausted. Several states have been involved in legal action, including Democratic attorneys general and governors from 25 states and Washington, D.C., alongside coalitions of cities, nonprofits, unions, and small businesses. The legal challenges highlight the unprecedented nature of the shutdown and its impact on vital social safety net programs. The delays in benefit distribution are expected to last until logistical and administrative hurdles are overcome, including reprogramming state systems and verifying partial allotments. While the judge's orders represent a significant victory for SNAP recipients, the long-term resolution remains contingent on the broader government shutdown being resolved. Government shutdown standoff intensifies as Trump calls for filibuster elimination. The ongoing government shutdown, now nearing its 30th day, remains unresolved with significant consequences for millions of Americans. Republican President Donald Trump has escalated the conflict by demanding the elimination of the Senate filibuster rule, a move intended to pressure Democrats into funding the government. This strategy follows a prolonged stalemate centered on disagreements over government funding, with Republicans resisting Democratic demands for expanded health care subsidies and Democrats blaming Republicans for the shutdown. The core of the dispute revolves around the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, a SNAP, with potential cuts looming for over 40 million Americans if a resolution isn't reached. Thousands of federal workers are already experiencing pay delays, and disruptions are being felt across various sectors, including air traffic control. Despite the growing crisis, a bipartisan agreement remains elusive, fueled by entrenched positions and a lack of willingness to compromise. Trump's call for filibuster removal represents a significant escalation, raising concerns about the potential for further disruption to the legislative process. Republican Senate Majority Leader John Thune has consistently opposed this tactic, highlighting the importance of the filibuster as a safeguard for minority rights. However, Trump's pressure is forcing a reevaluation of the situation. Several sources indicate a growing sense of urgency within the White House, with aides acknowledging the possibility of a prolonged shutdown. Despite this, there's a belief that Democrats are increasingly eager to find a solution, particularly as the November 4th elections approach. Key figures, including Speaker of the House Mike Johnson and Senate Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, continue to express frustration and a desire for a swift resolution. However, significant differences remain, with Democrats demanding guarantees regarding healthcare subsidies and Republicans insisting on a full-year spending bill. Behind-the-scenes discussions have explored potential compromises, such as revisiting the administration's recent firing of federal workers, but these have not yielded concrete results. The situation is further complicated by Trump's reluctance to engage in direct negotiations and his continued insistence on the filibuster elimination. As the shutdown stretches on, the blame game intensifies, with polling data indicating that more voters hold Republicans responsible. The pressure is mounting on all sides to find a path forward before the crisis escalates further, highlighting the significant economic and social consequences of the ongoing impasse. Upcoming gubernatorial races see mixed early voting data and campaign intensification. Recent early voting data across New Jersey, Virginia, and New York City reveals a complex picture for Democratic candidates heading into the November elections. While Democrats are exhibiting advantages in New Jersey and Virginia, particularly in mail ballot returns, the New York City mayoral race presents a more nuanced scenario with shifting voter demographics. In New Jersey, Mickey Sherrill, the Democratic gubernatorial candidate, is currently stronger than Kamala Harris was at the same point last year, largely due to a significant lead in mail ballot returns. However, Republicans have a slight edge in in-person early voting. Similarly, in Virginia, Abigail Spanberger appears to be in a slightly stronger position than Harris was, although Republican candidate Winsome Earl Sears remains competitive. Data indicates a slight Republican advantage in in-person votes, countered by a larger share of Democratic votes through mail. New York City's mayoral race shows a notable shift in voter demographics. Older voters, representing approximately 53% of registered Democratic voters, have outpaced younger voters, 18-29, at 15%, a trend that contrasts with the primary where younger voters significantly propelled Zohran Mamdani to victory. Andrew Cuomo, running as an independent, is trailing Mamdani with a stronger base among older voters and a more favorable geographic distribution of early votes, particularly in areas where he performed best. Precinct-level data shows that Cuomo's most supportive areas have exceeded their primary early in-person totals by 125%, while Mamdani's strongest areas have only reached 85%. Several high-profile figures are actively campaigning for the Democratic candidates. Former President Barack Obama is scheduled to campaign in Virginia and New Jersey, highlighting the importance these races hold as a gauge of the nation's political mood. Former Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg is also supporting Mickey Sherrill, focusing on securing funding for the Gateway Tunnel project. The races are considered crucial, especially given the historical precedent of gubernatorial elections held a year after presidential elections. Recent data echoes the red wave that occurred a decade earlier. Despite the advantages, no guarantees exist, as evidenced by the 2021 Virginia governor's race and the 2021 New Jersey governor's race. The races are being closely watched as indicators of the nation's political climate. Epstein's financial network unveiled JPMorgan's delayed response and ongoing investigations. Newly unsealed JPMorgan Chase records, released as part of a lawsuit and subsequent public demand, reveal a prolonged awareness of Jeffrey Epstein's suspicious financial activities, highlighting a delayed governmental response and ongoing scrutiny. The documents, including suspicious activity reports, SARS filed between 2002 and September 2019, detail over $1 billion in transactions involving Epstein and numerous Wall Street figures, including former JPMorgan CEO Jess Staley. These transactions involved Russian banks Alfa Bank and Sberbank, alongside investments and meetings facilitated by Epstein. JPMorgan Chase initiated the SAR filings early on, particularly after Epstein's 2013 guilty plea to state prostitution charges and a subsequent non-prosecution agreement with the Southern District of Florida's U.S. Attorney's Office. Despite these filings, no significant action was taken by law enforcement or government officials for years, a point raised by Senator Ron Wyden. The records reveal Staley's long-standing relationship with Epstein, including a meeting in 2010 with then Prince Andrew, and Staley's admission of having sex with Epstein's assistant. Furthermore, the documents show Epstein suggesting Staley recruit clients, including Google co-founders. Another key figure is Leon Black, a longtime associate of Epstein, who maintains Epstein provided him with financial advice. Black's legal team asserts he only paid Epstein for tax and estate planning services, saving his family billions. The U.S. Attorney's Office sought records from Bear Stearns, acquired by JPMorgan, as part of its initial investigation, leading to the non-prosecution agreement. JPMorgan has repeatedly denied knowledge of Epstein's criminal activities, except for Staley, and expressed regret for having him as a client. The unsealed records confirm a pattern of filings and a lack of immediate intervention, fueling accusations that government officials turned a blind eye to Epstein's conduct to secure lucrative fees. The revelations underscore the complexity of uncovering illicit financial networks and the challenges of holding powerful individuals accountable. The ongoing investigations, prompted by these disclosures, continue to seek evidence of potential complicity and the extent of Epstein's influence within the financial world. The Detchert law firm concluded that Black paid Epstein only for tax and estate planning advice. Judge blocks Trump's attempt to mandate citizenship proof on voter forms. A federal judge has ruled against President Donald Trump's attempt to mandate documentary proof of citizenship on the federal voter registration form, a significant setback for the administration's efforts to influence U.S. elections. Judge Colleen Kohler-Kotelly, in Washington, D.C., sided with Democratic and civil rights groups who challenged the March executive order. The ruling asserts that the president lacks constitutional authority to direct changes to election regulation, assigning this responsibility to states and Congress. The judge's decision, granting a partial summary judgment, permanently bars the U.S. Election Assistance Commission from implementing the proof of citizenship requirement on the federal form. This effectively halts the administration's push to ensure only American citizens are voting. The lawsuit, brought by the DNC and various civil rights groups, argues the requirement is an unconstitutional power grab. Previous attempts to implement similar citizenship mandates at the state level have proven problematic, creating confusion and disenfranchising eligible voters, particularly married women who may require multiple forms of identification. A Kansas requirement, lasting 3 years, resulted in the exclusion of approximately 30,000 voters. The legal challenges highlight the complexities and potential for unintended consequences associated with such measures. The ruling represents a victory for civil rights advocates and underscores the importance of maintaining access to the ballot box for all eligible citizens. Ongoing lawsuits, including those filed by 19 Democratic state attorneys general and by Washington and Oregon, continue to challenge other aspects of Trump's executive order, specifically the requirement that all mailed ballots be received rather than just postmarked by Election Day. The legal battles surrounding the executive order demonstrate a broader effort to scrutinize and potentially overturn Trump's attempts to shape the electoral process. The core issue remains the separation of powers and the constitutional framework governing federal election regulation.